From the Homestead Studios in Santa Clarita, California, it's Just the Tip-Sters with Melissa Morgan.
This is not a drill.
Remember, if you got a tip from Melissa, startling news from an unexpected source, a mysterious note found in the drugstore parking lot, how to get the hell out of San Jose, anything, tell us about it by calling the Tipster hotline at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837, or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. You just might hear your tip on the podcast. And now here's your host, who reminds you that there's just 364 remaining shopping days until National Unicorn Day, Melissa Morgan!
More cowbell. Yes, thank you for addressing my shame, Producer Mark. I did not know that April 9th was National Unicorn Day.
Well, you're to be forgiven.
Thank you. Tipster Angela messaged me, and she was like, a day made for you. And I'm like, no! Because it was like 5 p.m. Right. And I couldn't, plan a party or anything.
The annual party that you throw every year. Yeah.
I actually didn't know there was a National Unicorn Day, but I did wear unicorn horn around last night and this morning. Frightened Producer Mark. So.
Well, and I think the dog was a little scared too. But
it's a darker one.
It's kind of, was it purple? I couldn't. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's purple.
Yeah.
Even though I'm colorblind, I'm starting to recognize purple now because it's around here so much. But
I've cured you. I've cured your colorblindness.
Today's was a pretty drastic one.
It was.
And you were eating donuts, wearing it.
Yeah, I was eating donuts and wearing a unicorn horn with taffeta hanging. It's like it's a lot. It was a lot.
So you made up for forgetting.
I tried. But
you do
what you can, right?
There is a day for everything. I found out today. By being on Facebook this morning while walking the dog, I saw that today is National Siblings Day, and I'm sure you're celebrating that because you're happy you're the only child.
Yes,
yeah.
But
I got 6 of them.
You do. That's why I'm happy I'm an only child.
Yeah, I don't think any of us are celebrating today.
You guys aren't all getting together in a big group hug?
No, I mean I think we all love each other, to a certain degree.
Love is a relative term.
It's blood is thicker than water and all that
Tolerate,
stuff.
Maybe.
Well, no, I love my siblings. I do. I just think it's you don't really need to have a National Siblings Day. It's just
I thought it was kind of sweet.
Well, I guess.
I mean, because I don't have any, so I thought it was sweet.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe it is. I guess that's because you don't have any. I think that you think it's sweet.
There are people who actually really are close to siblings, and I love that. Yeah. It's very unusual and rare for me. And siblings are a lot like, old friends. You can stay apart for a long time, but then you get back together, and it's like you never were away.
That is true. No, that part is true. Absolutely.
So this is not a drill, pertains to the contest that we announced last week. This will be the second week ongoing, and it will wrap up after the next episode airs on the 20th of April. That'll be by midnight. Tuesday, April 20th is the last chance to enter. And we have had more entries because you guys are so lazy. If I don't ask you like a question or make you, jump through a hoop, you will enter. I'm like, hey, I saved one of Siren's turds on her walks. I'll give it away. Just tell me you like this post.
I think that might be a little
extreme. Maybe. But I can't believe that it's a huge number of entries already, and we are very grateful. So you still have time. You still have another week. All you need to do is go on to either our Just the Tipsters Facebook page or JT Tipsters Pod, I think it is, on Instagram. I'm sorry, I don't even know my handles, and I have no idea what it is on Twitter.
Just type in Just the Tipsters anywhere.
Or JT Tipsters Pod or something. I don't even know.
It'll all show up.
Yeah, I think Instagram might be Just the Tipsters, and I think Twitter might be JT Tipsters Pod, JTT Pod, or I'm sorry.
We're gonna have to.
I'm lame as shit.
No, it's just we're just gonna have to crack the whip over at the marketing department. They should provide you with all this information.
Oh, they should. They're fired.
Yeah,
the marketing division needs to be cut out.
So you sure you don't want to throw in we watch a lot of guys' grocery games. You sure you don't want to throw in a last minute curve and make them do something for it?
Yeah, they can't use any food items from aisle 1 or aisle 10.
There you go.
They can't use dairy or meat. So all you need to do, seriously, is just like the post where I show the prize package, which is 2 crime scene masks made by the inimitable tipster Sandy, who is just phenomenal. And these masks are, she made some for myself and producer Mark a while ago, but these were fresh made and hot off the presses. And I opened one and I'm kind of like, messing around with it. And I'm like, this is fucking phenomenal. So it's, folded like an accordion style. So it fits any size face. You can fold it up to very small. You can expand it if, you are, have a larger face. The ear loops have those little tabs, so they're adjustable. And I have a lot of piercings on my right ear, so it's always uncomfortable, but not her masks. They come with 3 disposable filters, the PM25 filters. And I was like, how did she do this? I was trying to find the opening to put a new filter in, and it's at the bottom. I mean, it's like a little envelope folded, thing where you open up a little bottom slot and put the filter in. I mean, she's really like perfected the mask, and they're amazing. So it's 2 crime scene masks. Because let's face it, most everyone's mouth at this moment in our history is a crime scene. And a small gift set from Bath & Body Works called You Are Made of Rainbows. It has a little unicorn on it. And it is warm sugar vanilla body spray, body lotion, and a little portable hand sanitizer that you take with you. So masks and sanitizers and moisturizers. I'm trying to make everyone smell better and feel safer. That's my entire mission in life.
You are a humanitarian.
In every way, shape, and form. Don't you forget it.
Damn straight.
Yeah. Speaking of that, please know, my beautiful tipsters, that I'm not like all up into the serial killer jam. A few of them are fascinating, but please don't think you have to send me everything and anything related to serials. It's okay. I'm all right. I got, a message from a detective, and he's like, found a shirt for you. And it says, allow me to seduce you with my knowledge of serial killers, which I'm not sure I really have that much knowledge of serial killers. I bet there's a lot of podcasts that focus, specifically on serials, and they have a lot more information. But
allow me to seduce you with my knowledge of serial killers.
Yeah,
I'm kind of worried, darling. Who's going to approach you while you're wearing that in public?
It was a joke. It's a jokey joke from the detective. I think he thought it was funny, and I thought it was funny too. But
it is.
And then this morning I get a wonderful message from a tipster. It's like, "Are you watching this?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not." And I can't remember. I don't know if it's on Netflix or I think it's Netflix. Anyway, I sound insane, like I'm whining about something I guess I should know a lot about, but I'm most serials are just the way most murderers are, and they're gross. And it's not anything I really want to know a lot about. What interests me is the hubris of someone who thinks they can take not only one life, but a bunch of them, and they have the right, they can follow their desires, and they just do what they want, and that's that. And that's what fascinates me, is what propels that kind of person. We can all understand someone in the heat of anger striking someone, and they fall and hit their head on the fireplace. I'm going to use that as every excuse. You're ignorant, you're drunk, you have a gun and you shoot someone. You're ignorant, you're sober, you have a gun and you shoot someone. You have a knife and you stab someone. You're in the kitchen cutting, vegetables. I don't know. We can all understand something like that, sort of. And the majority of murders are done by someone who knows the victim. But occasionally, like the case we're going to discuss today, it's a complete stranger on stranger crime, which is mostly, in my mind, the most heartbreaking. Every loss of life is heartbreaking, but things like what happened to this sweet young man are more troubling. And the whole case just picks on every nerve I have, actually. But before we get to that, I have to say a special thank you to Tipster Judy. Sometimes we don't know how long it will be before someone hears an episode or who that person might be. It's one of the things I love about podcasts is that they're in the ethers as long as the podcast creator leaves them available. And you can hear something that's, a year old, which is sort of what happened with this case. So, episode 133 was the story of Crystal Marler, and I was asked to cover that by a Kentucky native. And we spoke to Crystal's grandmother. And it was a case that had really affected this small town. And just a few days ago, I'll just tell you that I'm not sure what's going on in the email world, but we have gotten some of the most beautiful emails over the last week. Beautifully written emails. They're not about beautiful subjects. They're about difficult, awful subjects, but so beautifully written. I guess the tipsters are just poetic at heart, and you don't know until they send you a message.
They're some of them are beautiful, and you can tell they're beautiful people who are writing them.
Absolutely. You can feel it, popping off of the computer screen or coming at you on paper, which is, I printed Tipster Judy's email out. So this is from Tipster Judy, who lived in the area, and not only lived in the area, went to school with Crystal Marler. And the way she writes is just so beautiful. I have to read her email. And she said, Crystal Marler was exactly everything you said she was. She was stunningly beautiful, the kind of girl who took up the whole room when she walked in. She had a smile that was intoxicating. She was very quiet, never had a whole lot to say. She was very kind. I wasn't friends with her, but I liked her, and I never knew of her ever getting into trouble or causing trouble. She kept a low profile. And then one day she was gone, and no one really had a lot to say about it. That part I remember anyway. I was a senior and engulfed in my own dramatics. I wondered what happened. I thought maybe her family had moved, or maybe she'd gone to live with her father. There had been talk of him being black, and he wasn't around. So there was talk that Crystal was biracial, and that was a big deal in the county. That's what everyone from the county always called it, the county. There were no black families in the county at the time, and as a matter of fact, I only remember there ever being one black family during my entire childhood, and they didn't stay long. Then the rumors started circulating. A couple of brothers were said to have been bragging about killing her, said they raped and killed her because she was, well, that word. I never heard either of them say that, but they came from a rough bunch, and I wouldn't have been surprised if it was true. And then Crystal was found, and one of those brothers tucked tail and ran to Lexington. The other one died. From what, I don't know. I actually do know. Since your podcast, the other brother has died, and so has their father. Word was that he helped them hide her body, and you know how words are. Sometimes they're meaningless. I don't think Crystal's family will ever get the justice they seek, but I do think justice has been served. Sometimes justice is served by God instead of man. Just my opinion, though. I think Crystal's name will always be linked with Seth and Matt Cordell. It may be too late now to ever prove it. So I emailed Tipster Judy back and said, I thank you. I'm glad you were looking for her story and you found the podcast. And I said, I don't know. I said to her what was said to me my freshman year of college. I don't know what you do for a living, but if you do not become a writer, you will be cheating the literate world. And Tipster Judy is a nurse and had worked, ironically, with Crystal's mother, Abby, at a nursing home in a nearby city. And she said, I never met Abby before Crystal's disappearance. I have no idea who the normal Abby was. I'm certain it wasn't the broken woman I knew. She carried her pain like a backpack. That's, incredibly beautiful and heartbreaking. And sometimes perpetrators are taken care of by a force greater than us. And the same thing probably happened in the case we're going to discuss now. I know one of the Cordell boys died on the way to the hospital. His father was driving him. I believe it was burst pancreas or appendix. He had an appendix, I think, that burst. Anyway, so the Cordell family is no more. And we don't know for sure who killed Crystal. We know she was murdered. But they were bragging at different parties. And as we've heard before, sometimes people go to parties and brag about doing things they didn't do. But it's, we're going to say that case is probably going to have to be closed because no one's left alive to discuss it. And the one thing that keeps me going about the case we're talking about today is maybe someone's still alive 30 years later who knows something. And I will tell you, this case took me down an extraordinarily odd rabbit hole that the kind of thing I had not experienced before. So I became interested in this case because it was local. It was about a young man and some friends who moved from Medford, Oregon in the mid-'80s to Los Angeles right out of high school. It's Matthew Chase and two siblings, Matt and Teresa Dahl. And they moved to Los Angeles in the mid-'80s because they were artists and they wanted to live in the city. And it's that bravado of youth where you think, I'm young, I'm bulletproof, I'm invincible, everything's going to be fine. I'm smart, I know how to take care of myself. And the thing is, sometimes things like this happen, and it's not because we weren't trained well enough in defensive moves or we didn't plan enough. Sometimes really shitty things just happen. And I'm just going to call this a really shitty thing that happened. But what bothers me is the series of more shitty things that happened after Matthew's disappearance. That's the part that I'm very upset about, is what happened after. And I will tell you that I wouldn't know a lot of this information, the more truthful, gritty, uncomfortable pieces of information, if it weren't for our friend Ted Lyde, who has a podcast called Learning Not to Swear. And it's a beautiful podcast where he talks about his family, his life. I've known Ted for 31 years, maybe. I used to manage comedy clubs in the Cincinnati area. Ted was a very accomplished, solid comic from Chicago who played a few of my clubs, actually, Go Bananas and The Funny Bone. And he and his wife, Jamie, moved to Los Angeles, and they have a daughter and a son, and their son is nonverbal, and he talks a lot on the podcast about raising his son and his daughter and his marriage and the entertainment industry and writing scripts and auditioning. And it's a full life that Ted has. And he recently had a health scare that was really scary for the rest of us who know and love him also. But in 2016, he interviewed his friend, Teresa Dahl, who happened to be Matt Chase's friend from childhood and roommate in their apartment in the, I'm going to call it the gritty area of Los Angeles. It's the Pico Union area.
That's one gritty area, for sure.
I wasn't really sure of the demographics, but I can tell you, learning a little more about Matt and about the situation, I kind of understand. It is sort of the bravado of youth. I don't want to call it the ignorance of youth, but the bravado of youth, where, you're like, everything's going to be fine. So Teresa and Matt Dahl and Matthew Chase move to Los Angeles in the mid-'80s, and they all work at a storied department store, Bullock's. And producer Mark can talk as a LA native, you can talk a little bit more about.
Yeah, in LA, when I was growing up, in the 60s and early 70s, Los Angeles was one of the great department store towns. I mean, my grandmother used to take us shopping with her downtown, and all over the city, there were several department store chains all over town. There was the May Company, the Broadway, I Magnin, J Magnin. I think they were related family members that had competing department store chains. And there was Bullock's, which these were all local LA chains. That some of them branched out of LA, but mostly they were all based in LA, and it was quite a time. Very competitive and very popular department stores.
When I moved here in 92, I was overwhelmed with the number of department stores, the competition. Like there was Mervyn's, which was a little more like a upscale Target maybe. But, I remember Bullock's, and then I remember Broadway, and then I remember May Company, and then I remember Robinson's May.
Robinson's, that's right. Robinson's was another one. Robinson's was a separate company, and then Robinson's and May Company merged. This is when everything started falling apart for department stores. And then I know Bullock's merged with somebody briefly.
It was Broadway.
It may have been, but it was kind of sad to see it all kind of fade away that way.
Yeah, it really, Los Angeles is a fascinating town in that way. And when you think about, merchandising and retail, it's kind of a fascinating area, and the number of stores and the type of stores and the similarities, but yet. Yeah, it was a fascinating time. So I moved here 4 years after Matt went missing. But so they've lived here a few years. It was, a sketchy area. They wanted to live in the gritty city, and they did, not always realizing that it was also a difficult place to live. It could be much more difficult. And Matt had a tendency to walk everywhere. So Teresa, on June 8th of 1988, says to 22-year-old Matthew, her friend, not her brother, you're going to go out to deposit your paycheck. Could you pick up some cat food? And so you don't walk. Here's my car. So Teresa gives Matthew the keys to her red 1983 two-door Volkswagen GTI. If you remember, they were like a little square boxy car. And Matthew Chase walks out the door. He leaves his wallet at the apartment. He takes only his bank card and his check. He was going to deposit the check, get some cash out, pick up cat food, and be home. And it's close to midnight by the time that he's like, I want to deposit my check and get some cash. And he walks out the door at around 11:45 on June 8th of 1988, and he is never seen again. Now, Matt and Teresa Dahl, I'm going to call Matt Dahl Matt and Matt Chase Matthew, so we can keep them separated. So Matt and Teresa Dahl call the police and say, hey, our friend did not come home, and he has my car and his bank card, and that's it. No ID on him. And they're like, yeah, he's an adult. They didn't get a whole lot of help. So what this story is a terrible seesaw of remarkably shitty inaction by a police agency that was being investigated and was completely under fire, and the other end of the seesaw that is rising up is this beautiful community that supported Matthew Chase. And I don't mean Pico Union. I mean a higher source. His friends, his family, his friends' family. They mobilized in a way I've never seen. I have never seen anything like this. So these young people in their early 20s realize immediately they're not getting help and finding their missing friend. And what does Matt Dahl do? He calls the bank and pretends to be Matthew Chase and says, hey, I'm just wondering, has anyone used my card for anything? Now, this is 1988. It would be very difficult to do that nowadays, but
That's a smart guy.
Oh, Mark, there's so much more. You can't believe what these two young people did to try and find their friend. If there's anything in this story that lands with you, it's that your friends are priceless. And these are the kind of friends that I wish everyone had. And these are the kind of friends that I think every victim of any sort of violence really needs, because they were literally detectives. They were amazing, quite frankly, amazing. So Matt Dahl pretends to be Matthew Chase. The bank says, well, you know what? You're right. There's a whole lot of multiple attempts to get money out. They go back to the police and say, look, something bad has happened. There's a problem. Matt took his check and bank card to deposit, was going to stop and get some cat food. He's not back. The car's not back. There have been multiple attempts at different banks to get money out. And here's something that Matthew Chase probably did. We don't know because we can't question him. But he was trying to signal for help. He kept putting in odd denominations, like $280. He had set a limit of how much he could take out. He had set that himself, and Teresa and Matt Dahl knew that. And he was attempting to take out weird numbered, $210, $220, $280, 11 different times around the city in different ATMs. And it was, he deposited his check and got some cash out, a little bit of cash to get the cat food and to have walking around money. And they believe that he was pretty much targeted right after that.
It sounds like it.
It really does.
Sounds like somebody found him at the ATM.
Yep. Well, we know they did because we actually have photographic evidence of that. And it's chilling. It's chilling. So at the first ATM, he deposited his paycheck and got some cash. And then within 30 minutes, there was an attempt to take out $280, which couldn't happen. Two more attempts were made a little bit later on. The first attempt was for $200, and then it was refused due to insufficient funds because his paycheck hadn't cleared yet. A minute later, an attempt to take out $100. It was also rejected. 11 minutes after that, and a different bank in a different neighborhood, Matt's ATM card is used again. But this time, they lucked out because it had a hidden camera that took photographs. And we're talking 1988. The pictures are difficult to see. They look ghostly, quite honestly. They look very ghostly. So Matt is a tall young man. He's 6'2", and he was very lean, probably 150, 160. He was very thin. And there is in this photo that is haunting. They look like two disembodied heads, quite honestly. There is another man leaning over Matt's shoulder. He's shorter and stockier. And Matt's face is very closed and stony because I'm sure he's under duress, And this other man is just like standing there watching everything he does, and he's probably being held with a weapon, which we'll find out later. And, they did sketches, which I don't think are great, but it's so difficult with this grainy picture from an ATM. You can't really tell, except they're both so close. Their faces are so close. He doesn't have a mask on, and, you know, Matt is identifiable, and this other man, we'll find out 30 years later, is identified, and I'm still not completely sold. But so over the next day and a half, while Matt is still missing, there's 5 more attempts to take money out of his account. When his paycheck finally cleared and $400 was taken out, the card was confiscated. And, you know, the ATM captured it because the dolls said, please, you know, capture the card and maybe there's fingerprints on it. I mean, this is how smart these kids are.
Really? Unbelievable.
Yes, they asked the bank, please confiscate the card the next time it's used because there's, you know, illegal transactions and this could have evidence on it. Unfortunately, it didn't, you know, pan out and there were no fingerprints. It was dusted for fingerprints, but there weren't any on it. And there aren't any anywhere, which means he probably wore gloves. But I mean, it's so, I can't believe how they clicked into gear and did these amazing things. So a small step to the side, during 1988, there was a huge crime spree, a prolific ATM robber, and his name was Curtis Taylor, and he was a drug addict, and he was finally arrested in late 1988 after Matthew Chase's remains had been found. But he, you know, is at least indicted on 25 robbery victims, $3,000 like at each, you know, attempt. He's indicted on trying to rob 12 other people. You know, he pled guilty to 37 robberies and attempted robberies and holdups. Now, he was prolific in the fact that he had victims in Hollywood and downtown Los Angeles and the San Fernando Valley and the San Gabriel Valley. And he would most of the time use a gun. Now, we find out later on it's a toy pistol. But, you know, he would most of the time use a gun and say things like, I'm sorry, I need money for drugs. Give me $200 or you won't get out of this alive. You know, they're saying he probably committed a lot more robberies. Yeah, I guess my favorite quote is, punch 200 into this machine or I'll blow you away. That was one of the things that he said to one of the victims. Act like we're boyfriend and girlfriend. And when he sees her, you know, getting money out of her ATM, and then when she gets it out, he pushes her aside and takes, you know, the maximum amount allowable out of the ATM, which was $200 at the time. But of course, as he leaves her, you know, on the sidewalk, knocked down, he says, sorry, I need the money for drugs. Now, his attorney...
That's really charming.
Yeah. And to know that it was a toy gun is like, okay, doesn't make it better. It's still, you know, the use of a weapon. It doesn't matter that it can't kill anyone. It's, you know... His attorney is like, you know, he made a point of never injuring anyone. If someone told him they would not cooperate and give up their money, he would just walk away. Okay, well, what do you want, like an extra cupcake at dinner?
You get less prison time if you're caught. When you do, no, you do. If you're not using a loaded gun or if you're using a toy gun,
right?
The penalty is different. But,
well, he did get. He'd been in jail already for 2 years when he was indicted in 91. So he had been arrested, I guess, in 89. Or he had been arrested, I guess, in the fall of 88. But he'd done, you know, more than 2 years already. So, you know, they said because he took the plea deal, you know, it's like, well, this is a good deal for both sides. I feel like they're trying to you know, clear the books and put a whole bunch of other crimes on him. But okay, well, you know, you always want the right person to be arrested for what they do. But if you're going to do this multiple times, occasionally other crimes are going to be thrown onto your plate, and it's tough shit. Don't do that or you won't get arrested. But he, I don't know how much time he served, but he could have been out in 11 years, for good behavior, and I don't know what happened to Curtis, and I don't care. But they thought at first that perhaps it was him. And there was just so much going on at the time. And here, Teresa and Matt Dahl are doing detectives' work to try and find their friend. Now, this part is very upsetting. But Teresa, beautiful young Teresa, would go to the same ATMs that they knew had attempts from Matthew's card, with her brother driving, and she would have a knife in her pocket. And she would go late at night to ATMs, pretending to take money out, hoping to trap.
Oh my.
I know. It just makes me want to cry.
Oh my goodness.
They were hoping to trap the person that had, taken Matt. Now, they didn't know at the time, because there's no car and no Matt, they didn't know what had happened and what had probably happened not long after he had gone missing, quite frankly. There were people that were like, oh, I saw him. I've seen him. And I'm telling you, Matt's family comes from Oregon. The Dahls are here, and their family comes, their family, their parents would fly down on the weekends, and they would all split up and search for Matt.
From Oregon?
Yep.
Wow.
I'm telling you, it's this community that wanted to find Matt. The support for him, it's overwhelming. What they went through to try and solve his case. So it gets worse. Teresa and Matt Dahl are trying desperately to get the police to take them seriously. And they're like, he's an adult. Maybe he just wanted to get away. So she goes to the Rampart Division, which is in the area that they live. That's the local jurisdiction that they would want to report this to.
Which is the Los Angeles Police Department.
The LAPD, the Rampart Division, which, as I said earlier, had come under a whole lot of fire for corruption and a history of things.
It was a very bad time for the LAPD in general. The LAPD has a horrible history up until very recently, throughout the 20th century. And in the late 80s, it was going through a very bad time as far as bad publicity for police abuse and other things.
Yeah, and there was, a raging gang, society, multiple gangs in different parts of the city, which comes into play here in a kind of a offshoot kind of way. So Teresa and Matt go to the Rampart Division to report Matthew Chase missing. And they're just not really going to hear about it. They're like, he's an adult. So a week after he has been gone, they try again. And she's sitting across from a detective, someone who has worked their way up from patrol to being given the title detective. And she says, look, I need someone to take a report. And he said, well, you could report your car stolen, but then if we find him, we'll arrest him. And she's like, fine, have him arrested. I mean, we want to find him. What if he's, he had no ID. What if he's hit his head? We have handed out thousands of flyers over the last week. We've had people tell us that he has shown up in homeless shelters. So, it was giving them some sort of, hope that he was still alive. And the detective just didn't really want to be bothered or want to do the paperwork. And he said, okay, well, do you have a picture of him? And she has his wallet because he left that at home. And this is tough. This is the tough part. She hands him his license and says, here's a picture of him. And the detective looks at it and throws it back at her and says, he's a faggot.
Oh, for Christ's sake.
I was stunned. And I don't know that I would have believed it if I hadn't heard it out of Teresa Dahl's mouth. And she says, what makes you say that? And he said, I can tell by the way his eyebrows are arched.
Okay. I'm going to shut up now. Otherwise, I'm just going to get on my soapbox.
It's ugly. I'm just going to tell you it's ugly. And Teresa Dahl is like, well, we need to help find him. And she believes, because she thinks people are going to do their job, that a missing persons report has been taken. And a week later, she goes back to the Rampart Division to see what's going on. And they've never filed the report.
Well, of course not.
So she has to file a report on her car being stolen by Matthew Chase. And about a week after that, the car is discovered abandoned, not that far from where Matt went missing. And the only clue in that car is a blue bandana in the back seat with some numbers and initials on it. And Matt and Teresa Dahl are like, well, it doesn't belong to us. We do not recognize it as far as Matt Chase's. And, quite frankly, it's a navy blue bandana with a lot of detail on it. And there's letters ES, PBS, CLS. And as producer Mark can tell you, again, I didn't move here till 92, but I think you can find a lot of information about the fact that there were so many gangs in the 80s in Los Angeles. And
identified by the colors red and blue.
Yep, exactly. The Crips wore the blue bandanas. The MS-13 wore the black ones. The Bloods wore the red ones. Another group I can't remember wears purple. So a navy blue bandana with the series of letters on it could very well have been from a gang member. The only thing left in the back seat, the only thing in Teresa's car, didn't belong to her or her brother, didn't belong to Matthew Chase. So, I honestly don't even know if it was tested. I do know that the ATM card was tested, but I have no idea if this bandana was ever tested. So this case is so bizarre that it was even an episode of Unsolved Mysteries in December of 1988. And even though it got a lot of ratings, there were no leads. But before that, and they don't even know it's him yet, because it took till the following year for him to be identified. September of 1988, there's a body discovered in a ravine in Pasadena. And the cause of death was, it says here, a gunshot wound, but Teresa Dahl said it was 2 gunshot wounds to the back of his head, which is another gang marker, a double tap to the back of the head to make sure someone doesn't survive. Now, this is also terrible. A dog found a bone and took it back to its home in Pasadena, and the resident recognized it as a human bone. That's how they found Matt, but they didn't know it was Matt. So from September of 1988 through March of 1989, he was in the coroner's office as a John Doe. And it took such a long time. I don't know why, but there were some sort of complications getting Matt's dental records, and that's basically the only way they could identify him at this point. 4 months later, over the summer, he's laid there the entire summer in Pasadena in a ravine. And he was probably gone shortly after, the attempts at the ATM. So I can't believe it takes 30 years. And again, remember the interview I heard with Teresa Dahl was in 2016. In 2018, and I will tell you, this does not bring me any peace. This does not wrap things up for me. But in 2018, a woman was shown a picture of David Meza, street name Bear. And he was only 20 years old in 1988. And here, poor sweet Matthew Chase is 22 years old. They were similar aged. And David Meza was identified as the person standing next to Matthew Chase at the ATM by his girlfriend. She immediately recognizes him and said, he told me he killed a kid. Now, to make this even more odd is that David Bear Meza was killed 2 days after Matthew Chase went missing.
Oh, my God.
Like on a street corner.
Oh, my God.
He was just shot on a street corner by other gang members, quite frankly. He was murdered by other gang members. Now, there are, theories that he was supposed to just rob Matthew Chase, and if he killed him and did something, the way a gang leader wouldn't want a soldier to do, that he had to die for it. I don't know that that's the truth. I mean, when you live a life in a gang, chances are you may not make it out, the same way when you're in the mafia, you usually don't die of a heart attack, Vito Corleone. But, I don't know if that's why he was murdered, but it is sort of an odd occurrence that it was 2 days after Matthew Chase went missing.
Yeah, that's a pretty big coincidence.
So the things that sort of broke my heart was that Teresa thought she was doing the right thing by giving Matthew Chase her car so that he didn't have to walk late at night in a sketchy area. And he may have been targeted for the car and for the money, but after the murder, the car was abandoned very close to where he was taken. The things that I can't get over is that Teresa and Steve Dahl were detectives in an effort to find their friend. They went out and did the things detectives should do. They went to homeless shelters. They, handed out flyers on the street. Teresa was interviewed on the news, and she tells a very sweet and heartbreaking story about talking to a reporter and telling Matthew's story and getting to the part where the police are not paying attention. And the reporter says, stop, cut. And she takes Teresa aside and says, look, I get it. They're horrible. And you saying this is going to make it worse. They'll never help you now. So they cut out the part where Teresa said, and I tried to make a report and they didn't take it and they're not taking this seriously. The detective who called Matthew a faggot said, look, here's what happened. He's an adult. He wanted to live the gay lifestyle, whatever that means, and, didn't want to tell you. So he took your car and ran away, and he's probably with some guy. Yeah, he had a whole script written the entire time Matthew Chase is laying dead in a ravine. Jesus. Yeah, he had a whole script.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. It's the fact that they staked out ATMs pretending to be bank customers with a knife in her pocket and her brother waiting in the car in case something happened. They could both try and, they could have both died. They could have both died.
Well, sure, she had a knife, and if anybody had come up, they may have had a gun.
Exactly. So looking, finding that she had been interviewed for a very different reason because they're both parents to kids, on Ted's podcast. It was a very different reason. It was just the story that she was telling, finding pictures of Matthew Chase. This is the kid who went to his high school prom with a mannequin, and not just a mannequin, but she had a really cool dress on and he bought her a corsage.
Oh my.
Yeah, he kept calling her either she or her. And there's pictures of him he was like a total performance artist. He reminds me of producer Mark in his, younger years. So here's Matthew Chase looking like Tom Cruise wearing a black tuxedo and black Ray-Bans. He looks like Tom Cruise in Risky Business. And he's sitting at a table at his senior prom with, it's not even a mannequin. It's like a sewing dummy. Like she doesn't have arms or a head.
Oh my.
It's just like a bodice. And she has this beautiful dress on and a corsage, and he's got his arm around her. I mean, he's hilarious. He was in, all of these productions and wanted to go to this art institute in Los Angeles. So these beautiful kids from Oregon moved to the big city, wanting to expand their horizons and be artists. And the other thing that just gutted me was a phrase on Matthew Chase's Tombstone that is something I say to everyone when I know they've experienced a loss. And it is from Hamlet. And it is, "And flights of angels sing thee to thy rest." That is something we can wish for each other. No matter how we pass, we can hope that we are all sung to our rest by flights of angels. And while they believe it was David Meza, they are not ruling out associates. And if you know anything about what happened to Matthew Chase, call us at 832-847-7837 or email us at jttipsters@gmail.com. And more cowbell.
If you'd like to support this podcast, go to patreon.com/justthetipsters.